Gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be with you. This is the family hour of the Yahweh blog. I'm your host, Craig Wynn. We have Kevin up top, Kirk right
Yeah.
below him, and this time
Got
we have we have audio. Everybody can hear one another, so it's delightful to
Great.
be here. Unfortunately, gentlemen, as we're going to continue with the Qatsyr harvest. That's the volume here. And that's not the unfortunate part, because I think this is actually a pretty good read. One of my favorites, maybe my favorite of all the Yada Yah series of books at this point. But when we go into this book, we find that because it covers Shabbat, and we're about the business of clearing away the trash so that um, God's people have a chance to see the truth that was buried underneath it. We have a responsibility to expose the lies in the Christian New Testament pursuant to Pentecost, because Christians completely ignore Passover, unleavened bread, and or unyeasted bread, and firstborn children. I don't think they even know what they represent or what they are. But they're right there. They decided that the birth of their church is going to be Pentecost because, well, they needed something that was predicted, and so they decided to take
They predicted
it.
something.
Yeah, so they said, all right, well, maybe all of these things were predicted, but we can't figure out the Passover thing. We have no idea, because if our Jesus fulfilled Passover, then he fulfilled the Torah, and then there's no purpose for us in the Christian New Testament. So we really can't talk about Passover.
Let's don't go there.
We're committed to nothing happened on Saturday, so we can't celebrate matzah. In fact, if we admitted what matzah really is, which is the removal of the fungus of yeast and politics, we are really screwed, blued, and tattooed, because, well, we're all about religion and politics. So we can't celebrate that one. And firstborn children sounds way too covenanty, much like the covenant to us. So we'll pass on that one too. But we'll grab a hold of Shabbat. But of course, Shabbat means 7 Shabbat, and they don't much like the Shabbat, so it's kind of odd for them to pick that one. And it's, we look up here at the menorah, you'll see that it's the middle candle of the 7. So why would you pick the one in the middle and ignore the first 3 and the last 3? Well, it's hard to know, but that is what they did. And then, and the brilliance of Luke and Peter, they decided to steal from the prophets, particularly Joel, and made this big deal that what was happening here was explained and was the fulfillment of the prophetic testimony of the prophet Joel. And we covered that in previous programs. And what we found is that, well, the prophet Joel was profound, but he's actually speaking of what's going to happen in the last 15 days of year 6,000 Yah. So they were only off by, a scant 2,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it speaks of the last days, which makes Peter and Luke false prophets. But I'm not sure religious faith cares any about that. But we're not doing it for Christians. We're doing it to clear the muck away so that God's people might know the truth that was buried underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Lee, I think you told me this is part 28. Is that correct? Yes, part 28 now of the Shabbat Harvest Coming Home a Voice series. So we're going to jump right back into the Christian New Testament, Book of Acts 2:21. This is right after they finish embarrassing themselves by citing the prophet Yoel, misquote him, and speak of things, of course, that didn't even happen in 33 CE. There was no connection between anything that they claimed happened in 33 CE and what Yoel had to say. And what he had to say was of the last days and will transpire 8.5 years from now. But all that aside, they're not done incriminating themselves. So this is a continuation of Pentecost. And it shall come to pass that everyone, and as many as call upon the personal and proper name, the onoma of the Curio, to be the Lord, will be saved. Acts 20 or 2:21. But, fellas, what's his personal and proper name? Because, well, Curio is a title. And worse than that, it's a title of Hasatan. It's Satan, and according to Yahweh, that wants to lord over his people, wants to possess them, wants to control them, wants to own them. That's why, in the Quran, Allah wants nothing but slaves, total possession. And it was Paul who will say that he was demon possessed in his second letter to the Corinthians in the last chapter. So why are they celebrating the Lord? They're got to be aware that Elia is returning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you were a Christian at one time. Kirk, I don't know about you, Kevin, but you're big into Elia returning, right?
Oh, yeah.
Who was it that Elia opposed?
Well, yeah, I was against politics and religion. The king,
yes, and what was the name of the god that he opposed?
Oh, it's always Shira or
Baal.
Baal. I'm sorry,
yeah.
Baal.
Baal and Asherah. Baal is the Lord. That's what Baal means. So you got Elia, and his claim to fame was he excoriated the prophets of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So how can the Lord save if the Lord's prophets were all killed by Yahweh?
This is with a big L.
Yeah, I just something's really wrong here. You're not thinking it through. You're just not thinking it through. And then you have a bigger problem with Christianity, because the other half of that equation, 450 of the prophets that were bested and then killed by Elia, were prophets of the Lord, Baal.
Yeah.
The other 400 of them were prophets of Asherah, who is the mother of God, the queen of heaven, and the Madonna and child. So she's the mother god. And they've got one of those in Christianity. They even call her Mary, which means the contentious and embittered one. So, fellas, you're just you're just not playing with the full deck here. This is not good. Okay, it goes on. Yisraelite men. Now, by the way, Yisraelite would really not be a good term at this point. You know why? If he was really on his game, he would not have used the term Yisraelite.
Only the Yehudim were left?
Mm-hmm. They were all taken to slavery years ago.
Yeah, right. The 10 tribes of Israel were enslaved and lost from the point of view, at least at this time. No one even knew where they were. We do now, but we didn't then. So he could have said Yehudim, but there's a problem with him saying Yehudim. What's the problem with him addressing them correctly as Yahudim?
Yah's name's in it, for one.
Yeah, there you go. You would be acknowledging that the God's name is Yahweh, because Yehud means beloved of Yah. And it's actually a compound of Yahweh and Dod, so you'd be 0 for 2. Just said Yehud. So they just decided they would use Yisraelite men. Now, I guess women were meaningless here, because he speaks of andros here. But I guess the only woman that matters is the Mary, mother of God. The rest of them don't. So Yisraelite men, listen to these words. Don't listen to the Torah. Don't listen to the prophets. Listen to these words. Be the words that Peter was saying. Ayusu, which is a strange name. Where do they come up with Ayusu, you wonder? I mean, there's nothing, and there's no Hebrew name that's anywhere close to Ayusu. And sometimes they write it Ayusus, and sometimes Ayusun.
Yes.
Because of the Greek grammar rules. But are you familiar with anybody named Ayusu, Ayusus, or Ayusun, or anything close to that in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms? Is there a name?
Well, they
even
claim in the lexicons this Hebrew origin goes back to Yosha, but
Yahusha, huh?
That's what it says.
How
I don't know how that came about, but that's them.
okay. So what they're claiming is that it's the same name as Yahusha ben Nun, but it's Ayusu. That's not Yosha. I mean, the Greek language it's a phonetic alphabet. They can't transliterate. And if it was Yahusha ben Nun, which would be Moshe's successor, then why would you pick the name of the successor of Moshe when you're annulling the Torah?
That's problematic as well.
And then the only other place that there is a Yahusha mentioned, and it would be in the prophets, it's in Zechariah, and Yah was acknowledging that he's filthy. I mean, he's just totally unqualified. So now you're 0 for 2. So it can't be Moshe's successor. And by the way, Moshe's successor, his primary job was to be a warrior, really. They were now going into the promised land, and you had all of these hostile people there. And so he was a fighter. Was Christian Ayusu a fighter? No,
absolutely not.
So he cannot be described by Yosha ben Nun. He can't be the successor to Moshe and the Torah by Yosha ben Nun.
No.
So how do they claim that even though phonetically Ayusu doesn't correlate with Yosha, how can they identify him with that? And why would they call Yosha in their New Testament, this one, Ayusu, Jesus, and the other one, Joshua, if it's supposed to be the same name?
You see, you're using logic, and you're not supposed to do that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was really just trying to figure it out. So the bottom line is the closest name actually sounding to Esau, Iesou, would be Esau.
Yeah, not a good one either.
Well, that'd be a bad choice too, because he was the one person God said I hate.
In the womb, I hated him.
Right. So where they came up with this name is just beyond thoughtful. I mean, it's awesomely stupid. So for you to say, listen, before we knew that Dode fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, then you could have gone so far as to say, perhaps there was someone that Yahweh somehow used to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, and he had a name for them. We just don't know what that name is now.
So we have a placeholder.
Yeah. Right. So now that we know that Dode fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, there is no room for an Ayusu or a Jesus.
Correct.
Because it'd be nothing but a counterfeit of what Dode actually did. So not only can we say that there was no person who was by any name who would have been here in 33 CE doing those things. Oh, by the way, the Christian New Testament can't even tell you the date. I can, because I've gone back to Gabriel Dode, when, as God's most courageous and compassionate man, he told Daniel exactly the time that he was going to return to fulfill Passover and Matzah, and then Bakodim. But they don't know it, and it's not written anywhere in the Christian New Testament. They can't even give you any idea. And so there is no person named Ayusu that lived in the first century. And there certainly is no Jesus. There wasn't even a Jesus until the 17th century.
800. Yeah.
And that's really bad. So we've got a name here that makes absolutely no sense. It's not tied to anything. It's not Hebrew, and it's doesn't equate to anything that's ever been discussed in the Torah and prophets. And then they go one step further. They call him the Nazarene.
Problem. No Nazareth.
What that means is that this section was actually written by Eusebius,
Uh-huh.
who was the propagandist for Constantine
Yeah.
in the 4th century.
Right.
Because at the time of the time Pesach was fulfilled by Dode in the 1st century CE, there was no Nazareth. It didn't exist. And you can do the research on it. The fact is that there was a town in that location. Previously, it had not. It had been abandoned between 2 and 3 centuries earlier, in the 3rd century BCE, and when it existed in the 3rd century BCE, it wasn't called Nazareth.
Mm-hmm.
Nazareth didn't exist until sometime in the 3rd century CE, and so when Constantine's mommy went to the Holy Land, she came up with the notion that, well, he was Jesus of Nazareth. This must have been his childhood home, and so Jesus of Nazareth is a result of Constantine's mommy in the 4th century. And you know, if you're the emperor and you work for him, as Eusebius did, you go along with Constantine's mommy. But for anybody that's done their homework, you would know that not only was there no Iusu, but he could not have been the Nazarene. He was not Nazorius, because Nazareth didn't exist. And by the way, if he was a part of that the Nazarite vow, then he would have been Torah observant.
Mm-hmm.
That ruins their whole religion. Then they said, is a man. Now, if he's a man, then he can't be their God. Make up your mind. He says he was an andros. So he's either a man or is he God. There's no such thing as a God man. The only time you have a God man is when the Greeks or Romans are making their little statues and they make their gods into the form of a man. But, you know, that's a piece of marble. You know, he's claiming that there was a man that was a God man who publicly demonstrated to you that he is from Theos. Well, if you're going to say that he was dispatched by God, why not use God's name? If you're, you know, if you were in the know, if you're going to tell these Israelites about their God man, don't you think you would be able to identify the name of the God?
Yeah, all of them had a name.
Yeah.
Yahweh had a name. Why are they incapable of using it? I mean, it's one of the things that Yahweh says is necessary if what you're saying comes from him is that you use his name. They didn't.
Yeah.
That he is from Theos. Okay. How did he come from Theos? They said that he was born here on earth. How could he have come from Theos? But he was using supernatural powers and abilities, dynamis, to perform extraordinary miracles and with prophetic significance. What prophetic miracles did Jesus perform? I mean, they'll say he, that he what?
On water.
There is really no prophecy about turning wine into water, or water into wine. There is no prophecy on being nailed to a cross.
No fishing prophecies.
No, there's no being fishers of men prophecies. There's no going against the Jews and teaming up with the Gentiles prophecies. There's no prophecy on a New Testament. What was the prophecy? Perhaps the reason they don't list the prophecy is that it didn't exist.
That's a good choice. Yes.
So, what miracle, by the way, did he perform? There is nobody who was a witness to him allegedly turning water into wine, so you can't count that. And that's the stuff of legend. What's his miracle? Lazarus. Oh yeah, he went to a place where a mother was grieving that her son was sick and died, and he called in to Lazarus to have Lazarus rise. But you really don't have any credible witness to it.
Mm-hmm.
And what would be the purpose? I know there is one statement somewhere in the Torah and prophets that that one of the prophets was able to cause a man who appeared to have died to rise, but it's kind of a throwaway line and doesn't go anywhere because it's senseless. What is the purpose? So if you have passed away and you are a member of the covenant, you've capitalized on what God is offering, why would you want to come back in an earthly body?
Right.
Wouldn't that just be, man, if that had happened to me, I'd be pissed off.
Yeah. I said, how dare you?
Yeah, how dare you try to bring me back? Finally, I'm at home with my father, and now you bring me back to this miserable place. What's wrong with you? So the whole idea is craziness. So plus the fact, let's just pretend, playing along, that he had supernatural powers, which we are unaware of any, and that he performed super miracles with prophetic significance. Not only what are they, but if these people had seen somebody do something extraordinary, like claim he walked on water, but that was only a show-off sign, allegedly, for his disciples. I mean, what did he do in front of people? We're told that there's a basket of fish that somehow became more fish, and loaves that became more loaves. But these guys aren't eyewitnesses to that.
No. That's correct. Yes.
All right. These are signs which Theos. Oh, no! Now we're having Theos do the signs, not the man god. So who was doing the signs? Theos. So are you telling me the best that Theos can do is the turning water into wine? That's your god? What on earth are you claiming on behalf of your god?
Good point.
I know what the real God claimed. The real God claimed that his son and our Messiah, Dode, would open the door to life on Passover, and that he would take our guilt and carry it into Sheol on Matzah, so that we could be perfected, and then on Bekurim, that he would return to his father as the firstborn to allow us as firstborn children to be part of the covenant. I'd call that a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that our God had his son 600 plus years before he did these things tell us through Daniel the exact day he was going to arrive to do it, and everything that would transpire as a result of it. I'd call that
quite a prophecy.
Yes, a miraculous sign with prophetic significance. When Yahweh performed on behalf of Abraham and Yishak on Mount Moriah, and said, "Okay, fellas, you've confirmed the covenant, and you're here with your beloved son, your only son, but I'm going to provide the lamb." And obviously, he's talking about providing the lamb through his only son, which would be Dode, and exactly 2,000 years, 40 Yobel to the day, on exactly the same place, Yahweh offers Dode as the Passover lamb. I'd call that a miracle with prophetic significance.
Yeah, that's remarkable.
Yeah, I'd call creating the universe and then telling us about it a miracle of.
It's a good one.
Yeah. How he works.
Of significance. I'd say that the way that he revealed himself to the children of Israel, and then managed to work with an 80-year-old shepherd to best the most powerful military and economic and religious influence on earth with the 10 signs to free his children from religious and political oppression, I'd call that a pretty good miracle.
How do you tell a guy, this old guy called Noah, how to build a boat that can withstand a 500-foot tsunami?
Yeah, correct.
That's unbelievable.
Correct. And hold all of these animals and hold everybody safe for that period of time, or even convince the guy to build a boat.
Work along, yeah.
I'm
gonna build what?
Yeah. Then he tells us that it's going to be from a deep upwelling of seawater, knowing that it wouldn't be until the last 20 years that we could actually figure that out and find the Burkle impact crater and know that tsunami that you speak of actually occurred and raced up through the Tigris and Euphrates rivers all the way up into the Dead Sea, which we also know at that time was fresh water, and turned it to salt water, raised the water level by 500 feet at that moment, and then washed out the Bosphorus Strait. We have all of the signs of it demonstrated that his testimony was accurate.
Yeah, that's a miracle.
Can you tell me how many fulfilled prophecies there are in the New Testament to validate anything these clowns say?
I could tell you one if I had to.
No. The only ones that they can even draw upon are the ones that they plagiarized and just stole from the Yahweh's prophets. And even then, they discredit themselves because they stole more from Ezekiel than any other one, and Ezekiel's a false prophet.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay, so he said, it goes on. So these are signs which Theos performed through him in your midst, as you know. Well, if these were signs which God performed in their midst, which they know, why is he telling them? What's the argument? What's the point? Okay. Well, first of all, as we review this, the Lord is Satan, Yahweh is God. As a result of his son's fulfillment of matzah, Yahweh does not need to save anyone. The children of the covenant are perfected when our religious and political guilt is removed and taken into Sheol during unyeasted bread by Dode. Having left it there, it is nowhere to be seen, rendering God's children innocent. However, to benefit, one needs to know that Yahweh is God and that that's his name and that the Lord is the adversary. We must accept the conditions of the covenant, none of which were mentioned here. We must attend the Moed Mikre and understand what they represent, none of which was even permissible in Christianity. And then for good measure, we should be appreciative of what the Son of God and Messiah has done, all of which Christianity has stolen and perverted. That is all to say, Peter, Paul, Luke, and company collectively were the plague of death.
Yeah.
Of course, there was no person named Ayusu, much less Jesus, in the 1st century CE. There are no prophecies regarding the arrival of a Ayusu Jesus, but there are hundreds of prophecies about the arrival of Dode, who had foretold himself that he would arrive in midst of matzah and 33 CE, year 4000 Yah, to fulfill Passover, unyeasted bread, and firstborn children. He had come and gone by this point, leaving a void which Christians filled with replacement foolology. So, as we are aware now, there was no town of Nazareth. It didn't exist in the 1st century. There had been, as I shared with you, a small village by another name in that location several hundred years prior, but it had been abandoned by the 2nd century BCE. And therefore, the myth of Jesus of Nazareth was developed jointly by Emperor Constantine's mommy after her Holy Land tour and Constantine's propagandist, the nefarious Roman Catholic bishop, Eusebius. I can't wait to get rid of that, get my hands on that piece of crap during judgment. He's going to have some explaining to do.
Explain.
Yeah. At this time, there were no Israelites. 10 of the 12 tribes had been hauled away to slavery and obscurity 700 years prior to this fabricated narrative. The nation under Roman subjugation was Yehuda, and the native population was comprised of Yehudim. Since Ayusu never existed, it would have been miraculous, I suppose, for him to have made a public demonstration of godly intent. We'll give them credit for that. And as we have become aware, when someone claims to be using supernatural powers to perform miracles, they are showing off in the league with Satan, and they are not serving Yahweh. Yahweh does not show off. Further, if the imaginary Israelites knew it, then there would have been no reason for them to mock the fabled proceedings or for this demeaning and deranged reminder. This is all eerily reminiscent of the Quran, which obnoxiously claims that those opposing Muhammad actually knew that the devil's perverted and terrorizing advocate was Allah's messenger. You really know it. You're just yanking my chain. That's exactly what's being said here. You really know that he's that guy, but you're denying it anyway. Why would they do that if they knew it? They knew that he wasn't, which is why there's this argument. Moreover, why ask people to listen if all Peter intended to do was lie to them? In much of the same manner as passing off a counterfeit bill, none of this would have made Ayusu Jesus a theos god, as the passage concludes. It's not the purpose of the Passover lamb, by the way, to show off, and not in God's nature to dazzle us with signs and wonders. His preference is to impress us with his words, of which these buffoons have nothing credibly retained or shared. Should we want to be impressed, it's best we turn to the Torah, the Nabi, and Mizmor. I'm impressed every day. Back to continuing to pull together statements that pertain to our times and what we're doing, and you just look at things and with fresh eyes, and you see how much more depth there was to what Yah was sharing. It's like we were talking about Yoel when the prophet, when he said there would be fire and blood, and now we know why the fire and blood is there, and why the sun is darkened at that one moment, and then why the moon is turned to a bloody red color. We know all those things now in association with Teruah, but it's just so much more depth that is there than we originally recognized. So it is true that the Yehudim and Yehuda during the 80th Yobel year of 4000 Yah, 33 CE, failed to recognize Dod as the Son of God, fulfilling Passover. It cannot be said that they knew that Ayusu Jesus of Nazareth was the one who performed feats of daring do. If you missed the actual fulfillment, it's for darn sure you didn't know about the fake fulfillment. Goes on. This is Acts 2:23. He was appointed to the prearranged and prophetic plan and purpose of Theos. Oh, okay then. Boys, prove it. Please. Can you find a single prophecy that was prearranged and prophetic of the plan of God that addresses an Ayusu Christu, a Jesus Christ, any of this? The formation of a New Testament, the creation of a church, a new religion called Christianity, a religion of any kind. All the big issues: the arrival of an Iusu, arrival of a Christu, a man god, somebody being crucified and resurrected, a celebration known as Easter, one known as Christmas, Christians, a cross, a Trinity, a New Testament. Where do I stop? Now, I've been studying the Torah, Prophets, and Psalms for almost 24 years now. You guys have been studying it as well. Where is any one of the top 30 things that comprise Christianity? Where is there a single mention of even one of them in the Torah, Prophets, and Psalms?
There aren't.
Well, I'll give you one.
Paul.
Well,
Yeah.
There you go.
Don't listen to him.
There's one whole prophet.
666 years before Paul wrote his first letter, Yahweh called him the plague of death. They called him out by name and said, this guy's going to focus on Gentiles, and he, by the way, is the plague of death. So, yes, there is a mention of Christianity because its foremost author, God's calling the plague of death. That probably doesn't qualify as one of these prearranged and prophetic purposes of Theos, however, does it?
No. And they ain't gonna bring it up either, Kevin.
No, they are not. Have a who?
Yeah. Then it says that at the plan and purpose of Theos. So the prearranged and prophetic plan and purpose of Theos was to have him betrayed. Was to have him betrayed. Can you find that in the Torah that God wanted someone betrayed?
No.
Would be exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
Job wasn't sent here to be betrayed. He sent here to fulfill Passover. Yes, he wasn't betrayed. And who was the one, by the way, that was betraying him? If you're going to claim that he was betrayed, who betrayed him?
Yeah, good question.
Because what they're inferring is that he was betrayed by the Jews. But
of course. Yeah.
If the Jews recognized him as the one you know, then why would they have betrayed him? And how would they betray him since they had no influence over anything at that time?
Yeah, they don't tell the Romans what to do.
Okay, so God was the one whose plan and purpose of the Theos, he was betrayed and given over to the hand of the anomos. Now, there is lots of questions as to what anomos means, but when anomos is used in the Septuagint, and where Yahweh uses the word Torah, or used in the New Testament, it is used to replace Torah. Now, why they just couldn't write Torah, who knows? But the authors of the Christian New Testament chose not to write Torah, and they use anomos as if it was law. That's not what the word means.
No.
So it's just a very strange word to see here. So nomos is the word that they use for Torah. Anomos would mean not Torah.
Mm-hmm.
So he was handed over to the hand of the not Torah. Now, wasn't Dode here to fulfill the Torah? And if he didn't fulfill the Torah, what was the purpose of Passover?
Yeah.
Just a ghoulish event if it's not tied into the Torah. And if they're going to claim that their guy, Iusu, that his big plan was that he was going to be handed over to the not Torah, then what the hell was he here for? How could he have been prophesied and predicted by God if he was supposed to be betrayed by the not Torah? I mean, who writes this stuff?
I'm still trying to follow the double negatives.
Yeah, and it was betrayed and given over to the hand of the not Torah, who chose to take control and lift him up, affixing him. Huh? The Romans were the ones who nailed him to nailed Dode, as he explains in the 22nd Mizmor,
Mhm.
to the upright pole, the torture stake of the Roman Empire.
Yes.
And we know that they nailed him there because there are many descriptive prophecies that speak of him being pierced and nailed hand and foot to this Roman death stake, which was not in the shape of the lowercase t, one of these things. That was not what it looked like. It was the post stood in the ground, was left in the ground, and only the cross member was set on top of it. And so the person's hands were nailed to that top beam, and the top beam was just set on top. Wood was of scarce supply, and so it was a capital T, not a Christian cross would have been the particular device. But how could the Romans knew nothing of the Torah, so you can't call them the animos, the anti-Torah. They knew nothing of it. So you could say betrayed and handed over to the hand of the Romans. They can clearly say Roman in Greek.
Mhm.
So you say that he was handed over to the Romans, who took control of him and lifted him up, affixing him. Okay, but why would that be the plan of Theos? And why are you even saying it here, since you're used your substitute for Torah? Very poorly written, and who knows what they were trying to say, but it's not even close. There was no prearranged prophetic testimony pertaining to an Iusu or a Jesus, not a word. Iusu, Jesus, is not part of Yahweh's plan or purpose for anything. Jesus is nothing more than a Christian counterfeit, a worthless fable, a mythical misnomer. If that really upsets you and you're a Christian, then go read Twistianity and prove me wrong. Good luck with that. Because to prove me wrong, you have to prove God wrong. And if you prove God wrong, then you are wrong. So every prophecy pertaining to what transpired 7 weeks prior to Shabuah, when they were celebrating their Pentecost in year 4000 Yah, 33 CE, was written about one man, David. And yet they don't mention him. Oh, they will. He's going to be dead and buried. As we have discussed, the co-conspirators who conceived the Christian myth were keen on delegitimizing and demonizing Jews because, well, without doing so, there was no reason for their God to abandon them and replace Jews with Goyim Gentiles. So the whole myth of Christianity is nothing but a replacement. I was reading something that Huckabee said. He's the new ambassador to Israel, and he says, we have to respect Jews as Christians because our religion was based upon Judaism. No. Judaism didn't even exist at the time.
No.
Judaism was created by Rabbi Akiba and then codified by Maimonides. Judaism didn't even exist at the time. And God does not have any affinity for Judaism. Matter of fact, most of his prophetic text denounces his people for being religious. So no. And all Christianity, and I wrote back, is that all Christianity is a complete counterfeit and ripoff. It stole all of God's promises to Israel, Yehudah, and to David, and gave them without any authorization to this myth of Iusu Christu and Goyim and their church. But there's no mention of any one of the things they gave it to in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. So it's just a very crude act of thievery is the basis of Christianity.
So why did it sell so well?
Yeah. I think that initially, because the fact that God had done something really spectacular at this time with Dode, and the Jews didn't recognize it, and Paul came up with this really clever counterfeit for it, and that it had appeal because it was a new sort of religion where the religious didn't have to do anything. believe and you're saved. Just call upon the name of the Lord and you're saved. So it's salvation for dunderheads. You don't need to know anything. You don't even
have to read anything.
Nothing. You don't have to read anything. You don't have to learn anything. You don't need to know who God is, what He's offering, what He's expecting in return. Just call upon the name. By grace you are saved. I think it was that started, but I think it's mostly became popular because Christianity wasn't really all that popular until Constantine and Eusebius and Theodosius, and then ultimately the cult became exceedingly popular when it was mandated, and when you were either a Christian and throughout Europe, or you were dead.
That'll do it.
Yeah, it's kind of like why did Islam, as stupid as it is, become popular? Well, because you were either a Muslim or you were dead. They killed over 200 million people, proving their point. So the moment we go from it's popular, therefore it must have some deal of authenticity, we really fall into a terrible trap because, well, during the Roman Empire, the Roman religion was popular, but it obviously was wrong. During the time of the Greeks, the Greek religion was popular, but it was obviously wrong. During the top of the Egyptians, the Egyptian religion was popular, but it was obviously wrong. The Babylonian religion, the Assyrian religion, people have almost never been right. And lies are always popular. I mean, today, if you were to ask people, did Russia start the Ukrainian war? And 99% of people would say yes, and it's not even remotely true.
Yeah.
If you were to say, was America justified in invading Afghanistan after 9/11? And 90% of people would say yes, and there was no Afghanis involved, no Iraqis involved either, no correlation between Iraqis even in Al Qaeda. People believe lies. I mean, the First World War was based upon sinking of the Lusitania. It was the whole thing was a scam. Spanish American War, sinking of the Maine, another scam. The Vietnam War, based upon the Gulf of Tonkin incident. People believed it. They went off. Oh yeah, let's go out. Let's go fight some Viet Cong. It never happened. So it's easy to sell a lie. People like to be misled for some reason. So anyway, so while it was Peter's intent to protest that his Israelite audience was the one who betrayed the mythical God-man and gave him over to the control of the Toralists to be crucified, it was Peter, Paul, and company who were the antagonists towards the Torah. Now, with this now understood and acknowledged, I have another bone to pick with Peter and Luke. It's easy to misunderstand the notion of prearranged with Calvinism, particularly with it on the rise in the West. So I'd like to take a moment and make an important distinction. Yahweh's response to the fallen nature of humankind was predetermined, but our response to God is always subject to free will. So God predetermined that he was going to create this pathway back into fellowship through the terms and conditions of the covenant, the Bereth, and by way of the Moed Mikre and his son fulfilling them. And so he determined that would be the way for us to return back into fellowship with him and be part of his eternal family. However, the human response to these things always remains subject to free will. So each of us has the opportunity to ignore God's plan, serve a God of man's making, in the case of Christianity, or accept Yahweh, or we can reject him. Within prophecy, there are certain things that Yahweh has prearranged. The fulfillment of the Mikre through Dod's examples, for example. They have been, and they will continue to be accomplished on the stage of human events. You can be certain that Shabuah will happen when God said it will, as will Teruah and the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah, and Yahweh's return on Yom Kippurim and the reconstitution of the earth so that we can camp out with Yahweh on Sukkah. All of those things are going to happen when God said they were going to happen, and we're going to find. So He has determined that He's going to do those things. They don't predestine, however, all of the human events around them. So God's going to complete His Torah teaching in the proper order on the predetermined day, regardless of mankind's
Reaction.
response. But all other prophecies simply report what humans will do with the continued exercise of free will. In such cases, Yahweh has witnessed our future because He is akin to light, where time exists, where you can experience the past, present, and future simultaneously or in any order that you wish to. And Yahweh has witnessed our future in our past and reported what will occur before it does, but He's not predetermining what's going to happen. He's just simply reporting what He has witnessed in our future. That's why I tell people that, when they say that we shouldn't be so concerned about World War III and how the United States and Europe are leading the world to the precipice of nuclear war, or how progressives and Muslims are fanning the flames of genocide against Jews. So, it's all going to happen just as the prophets predicted. And the carnage from those things will either be mitigated or expanded based upon whether or not we do a good job of trying to warn people. So we have the opportunity, and I think responsibility, to try to minimize the negative aspects of these terrible mistakes that humans are making, and try to protect as many people as we can. In fact, the very fact that there's going to be a family reunion on Yom Kippurim and such a magnificent spectacle on Teruah requires that we do this work now. And that's why, we've written the books on Twistianity. It's why we've written the books against Islam, is to try to protect God's people so that there is a remnant left for these things. So God is reporting our future in our past, and He does so that when it occurs, then we have the ability to validate that God exists and He inspired these texts. And when these things consistently occur, as He attested, and we are provided proof that He put them in writing, and we have written copies that predate the fulfillment, sometimes by thousands of years, then we have absolute evidence that what we're reading was inspired by a being that was not constrained by time, because He's not predicting the future, He's reporting future history. Therefore, while Yahweh was certain that Yehudim would return to Yisrael in the last days as a result of the Holocaust, He had no hand in the horrific events of the Holocaust. Individual men and women made poor decisions, squandering the gift of free will, and the consequence has been devastating. Such will continue to be the case between now and 2033. The concluding statement now is as essential to the Christian New Testament's claim that the Christian Gentiles have replaced Jews because, they claim that Jews betrayed God, but it's errant in every respect. The purpose of Pesach and the Passover lamb is to serve the covenant family by this sacrifice. Had the Zerah not served to fulfill Yahweh's promise, there would be no assurance of eternal life in the covenant and no reason to trust God. So it wasn't God's purpose for man to betray his son, Dowd, in the fulfillment of Pesach. It was His plan to honor Dode's decision to serve as the Passover lamb because of the benefit it would have for the covenant family. So this was not a betrayal, but
No, it's a
instead
gift.
a celebration
Yeah.
of love and of life. It was the exact opposite. And it wasn't there to annul the Torah, but to save
Yeah.
through the Torah, to affirm the Torah. Dode literally had to walk out of the pages of the Torah to serve in this role. So Dode did not fulfill Passover because he was betrayed, but instead because he had chosen to do so on behalf of his people, and he said so. So if a modicum of Yehudim actually handed the Messiah over to the Romans, which is really unlikely, but just pretend, rather than blaming them and shaming them, we ought to be thanking them. No, fulfilling Pesach was essential for us to live. And for that to occur, the lamb must die. No. By the way, everyone was Torahless at this time. The Jews were in revolt against Yahweh and were just beginning to craft their initial Talmud, or would begin within 100 years, certainly, of this time. The Greeks were infatuated with the Odyssey, the Romans with the Aeneid, and the Christians with Paul's epistles. Further, Christians are actually complicit in this regard because they deliberately attribute Dode's sacrifice to their mythical misnomer, Iusus, Jesus. Then they would attest that he was murdered and resurrected, which is wholly disjointed from Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim. The Passover lamb's not murdered. It's a sacrificial death, and actually, in celebrating Pesach, the lamb actually nourishes the family, and of course, whatever remains of the body of the lamb is incinerated that night. There is nothing to rise or be resurrected, and being resurrected would be counter to the whole purpose. Again, it's like bringing the dead back to life. If Dode was required to come back to earth after fulfilling Passover and have that body discarded and successfully had his soul carry our guilt into Sheol, and then rather than going to back to Shamayim to live with God in the seventh dimension, but was brought back to earth, he'd be mad as hell.
Yeah.
I mean, I did what I said I was going to do. Our deal was, I'm the firstborn of the covenant. I have affirmed the covenant, and now I get to live with my father. I don't want to go back and live with these bozos down here.
Good call.
Yeah. I mean, it's just insane. Now, while pregumai was almost always translated as crucified, this Greek word simply means to affix or to fasten. That's why I translated it as such. I bring this to your attention because the Roman cross and its piercing nails were actually irrelevant. They're meaningful only in the sense that David, when he talked about his ordeal in the 22nd Mizmor, and then when Yahweh affirms the piercing of the nails in Zechariah 12, that this affixing is just a way of validating the detail that is proved accurate in the prophecy. So it has value from that point of view, but in terms of of something significant regarding the fulfillment of Passover, it's meaningless. So the Roman cross and its piercing nails were just simply irrelevant, and yet Christianity has made a religion out of the inanimate object. Really, it's an idol, and it's a gruesome idol. On top of that, I mean, who in the world would worship God by parading around with a dead God on a stick?
Disgusting.
It's just disgusting. it's like, and part of this is like crediting a knife that takes the lamb's life for the Yatzah Exodus rather than Pesach and matzah. So we're going to credit the knife now, and we're going to make a religion out of the knife that was used to prepare the lamb for the meal. Let's forget about the lamb. Let's go to the knife.
Yes.
Why don't we worship the fire that the lamb was cooked over?
Right.
I mean, stupid is as stupid does, I guess. They needed an object of worship, so that's what they came up with. We're going to come up with a cross. The fulfillment of Passover is about the who, the where, the why, the when, and the how, even the what. But, I mean, no. They're crazy. As an interesting aside, it is worth noting that the preponderance of the Catholic scriptures and paintings depict gospel Jesus in one of two ways. I've always thought this was interesting, but if you look at the pictures that the Roman Catholic Church has of their man God, he is pictured in one of two ways. He is either a helpless infant attached to mommy God, the Queen of Heaven, Mother of God's arms or breast, or he's helplessly affixed to a torture stick, the cross.
I've always thought that it was more of a showing we killed God. We're walking around with God on, see what we did to God as the Roman Church, and don't mess with us. I always thought it was a flex,
it almost is. It's like the Roman legions and their Aquila, as they would walk around with that captive, the eagle that could normally soar, but not with them. It's affixed to their pole,
right?
With their underneath their legions, and we control the eagle. We kill you too, and the Roman Catholic Church, we killed God.
Yeah,
and we tortured him to death, and the Romans did, and the Romans, Imperial Rome, that tortured him to death, became the Roman Catholic Church. We tortured God to death. We'll get you too. That's what the Inquisition's all about, unless you submit to us.
Yeah,
seems a lot like the Quran, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I think that's a bright statement is that they're using it, and of course they had to use the Mother of God, Queen of Heaven, Asherah, because it's really hard to have a religion if you don't give women something. And so the women were given Miriam, which means embittered, of course, and rebellious. But they can lit their candles. They can pray to Mary, and Mary is the Queen of Heaven, the Mother of God, is going to give them some dispensation. Of course, there was no Jesus, so there was no Mary. And if God's going to pick a person to be associated with his son, he's going to have a name better than Mary, because you can't have a worse name in Hebrew than Mary. It's embittered and contentious. And as a matter of fact, the one Miriam in the Torah, she is divorced from Israel. She is leprous and diseased. God told her to shut up. He didn't come and say, "Oh, blessed are you." No, he says, "You're not only sick. If your father spit in your face, I would still criticize you in this way. You're banished." They couldn't have picked a worse name. It's the name used for the waters of Meribah, which was the worst of the meltdowns in the Torah. But the Asherah cult, by every name that it played out under, was so revered at this point, it was just easier to sell Christianity. So you want to know why Christianity became popular? It incorporated all of the religious myths of all of the religions being observed amongst the Romans and the Greeks. So you give them the Mother of God and the Queen of Heaven. You give them Dionysus of the dying and resurrecting God. You just replicate. You give them Christmas and Easter, which were both pagan Roman Greek holidays. It just give them different names. They could continue to be pagans. They even give them the Babylonian Trinity. It was perfect.
Familiarity sells.
Yeah, it was extremely easy to sell.
Stay in line, pay your taxes.
Yeah, stand in line, pay your taxes. There you go. So it is interesting that, as I say, that gospel Jesus is either is part of the Asherah cult and the Mama God, or he is nailed. And when we Imperial Rome, if we can kill God, we can kill you. They're quietly saying that if he can't take care of himself, why would you trust him to take care of you? And that leads to trust us instead of with your soul, which is why they claim to have the keys to heaven, and worse, whatever they decide to do on earth will be done in heaven, and whatever they decide not to do on earth cannot be done in heaven. And yeah, they just it's not just that this myth of Jesus replaced the truth about Dode. It's not just that Israel was replaced by the church and Jews were replaced by Gentiles. It's the Roman Catholic Church replaced God.
I get it.
Theos restored him to life. Now, can God die?
No, sir.
So how could he have been the God-man if he died?
Can't die.
And if he was a God-man and he died, how did God, who was now dead, restore him to life?
Well, wouldn't have to, would he?
No. And why would he bring him back to earth if God is in heaven in the seventh dimension?
Tough questions.
God restored him to life. Is there any place in the discussion of Passover where the Passover lamb comes back to life?
No, sir.
No.
Not on my table.
So what in the hell are they talking about here?
I don't know.
How can they be celebrating Shabuah as Pentecost if they've got the Passover lamb not dead? Well, it was dead, but not dead.
Very confusing.
Releasing and dismissing him from the suffering and pain of death. You know, that's the thing that is so astute about God's plan with Pesach, Matzah, and B'Korim. Once you understand it, then you get the whole concept here, which is that the only thing that died on Pesach was a Bashar body, a corporal body.
Yeah.
That corporal body was, once the soul was out of that corporal body, well, it was been beat to a pulp. It had no value. It's like when Yahweh was saying, I want you to offer your corporeal body as the Bashar because you are the Bashar. So wouldn't it be perfect for you to offer your Bashar on Teruah? You're going to say, of course. It has no value to me at that point. Take it. If you can do something good with it at this point, I'm all with it. And Toad would say, that body has no value whatsoever. His life is in the soul, his nefesh. And Dode's soul did not die. The body was deprived of the soul, died, and meaningless, except it served to fulfill Passover. But apart from fulfilling Passover, that Bashar corporal body, Dode would have been delighted to have it discarded. And what are they doing here? They're going to say, the Roman church here is going to say that body that we built, we whipped the skin off of. And then we tortured it on this death state. What better thing to do to bring that body back? My God, that was the most disgusting piece of destroyed, mutilated flesh. I'm going to tell you what, if God pulls that fast one on me and he says,
Somehow. Hello.
Uh-oh. Do you just see him stuck? Still.
Yeah, he's stuck. Yeah, he's stuck. I don't know what's playing behind the frames, but what's being transmitted is he's frozen. I could draw his picture.
Right.
And you got another phone you can call, and there he goes. There it goes.
Oh, is he off? Okay.
Shall we read something till it comes on?
Nice.
You want to read the thing?
Go for it. Yeah.
Well, I've got, let me see where we are at 23. So we're reading where Theos restored him to life and raised him, releasing and dismissing him from the suffering and the pain of death, because it is not possible for him to exist and held in influence by these things. And then the commentary.
You know.
Well, that is the strangest thing in the world. So we went total blank screen.
You froze.
We went blank screen, and it came back.
Yeah.
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle. It's a miracle.
Well, you were saying if God pulls that with me.
Well, that timing is marvelous. Okay.
Oh, it's a miracle. Okay. Well, so,
that was good.
Well, that's pretty impressive, huh? I came back to life, guys.
Yeah.
I was dead, and after the pain and suffering of death, because it was not possible for him to exist and held and influenced by these things, I came back to life.
Yeah, but are you happy?
Yeah, oh, happy. No, because I'm back in the same body.
Right.
I've been in this body way too long. So, all right. So what we know here is that Yahweh did not restore Dode back to life, because Dode's life was never taken. The body was sacrificed. It's a Bashar body. The Nefesh soul was not. The soul carried our guilt into Sheol and then was released from Sheol. And that's why it's really important for us to understand that shield that Dode speaks of, that protected him and his soul in Sheol, and then he was released. I had somebody write me and said, if the black hole of Sheol is inescapable, well, then how did Dode get out? Yeah. I'm going to go on a limb here, folks.
Okay.
If you're the creator God of the universe, and you created this, what is really a 6-dimensional construct with, I think they say now it's 2 trillion galaxies with a couple of hundred billion stars in each of them, and you conceive the smallest aspect of it with the quarks and the leptons and the nuons and the protons and the atoms and the molecules, and how all of this energy now can be transformed into matter, and these things are just woven together in this unbelievable fabric. And then you conceived a 3-dimensional language called DNA to conceive life, that you probably have the ability to suspend the nature of a black hole long enough to retrieve your sun. So I think if you created all that, you probably have a little influence over what you created.
Mm-hmm.
That one dimension, that should seem like child's play, right?
Just absolute child's play. For Yahweh wouldn't have stressed over, how am I going to do this even for a nanosecond?
Right.
Now, do I expect that Yahweh's going to say, okay, kid, let me explain to you how I protected Dode in Sheol. And, you're sort of right on calling it a black hole, because it's a 1-dimensional construct where time is eternal, but all other dimensions are constrained, and there's no light. So, that's kind of an interesting analogy here. but I didn't really say that. This is your extrapolation, pretty smart extrapolation, but it's not exactly that. And my guess is that your level of mathematics and your overall
Yeah.
concept of physics and this a failure to understand the combination of Einstein's theory of relativity as it struggles with other theories in physics and string theory and the like. It's
Yeah.
probably beyond you. I'm just going to guess that it's probably beyond you if I were to explain the physics of the whole thing as to how I managed to pull that one off. But if
But I
you're
did.
curious, one day we'll have the chat.
We'll talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. And I'm probably not even going to be curious. I'm glad it happened. If he wants to disclose it, we'll have the chat about it. But no,
Not my first question, right?
not my first question. And somewhere along the way, you've got to say, all right, he created this whole thing.
He knows the back door.
He does. He has a back door. If the NSA has a back door into everything that we do in life, then the chances are God has a back door. So Theos did not restore him to life. He never stopped living. And he did release him, but he released him from Sheol, and they forget to mention that. He was not released from the suffering and pain of death because he did not die. And it says it was not possible for him to exist held and influenced by these things. Actually, it was possible because he was held and influenced by these things. And our understandings is infinitely superior to the authors of the Christian New Testament. And since they've created a religion, it's embarrassing that we know an infinite degree more about what actually happened than they do. So anyway, the Passover lamb was not revived, because that would defeat the purpose. Moreover, Dode's soul did not die not 3,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. That is the whole concept of eternal life. If those that, just take it from the point of view of Dode. Yahweh said, "You are my chosen one. You are my beloved son. You are the anointed Messiah. You're the returning king." So is there any chance under those circumstances that Dode could have died?
I mean, the soul, no.
No, Dode's soul could never have died for Dode to be all of those things. You think that God's going to say, this is the guy, this is my exemplar and my son, and oh, by the way, I'm going to kill him.
And I love him. Yeah. And I'm going to kill him?
I'm
No.
going to kill him.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I'm going to kill him. I'm going to bury him. Okay, it was fun, but it wasn't that much fun. So what the heck? No. So Dode's Nefesh has never been destroyed. It has never been extinguished. And if you want absolute proof, just hang around to 2033 and you'll see it.
Meet Dode, yeah.
Yes. At the time, Dode's soul was not released from the pain and suffering he endured because it was graphically conveyed in the 22nd Mizmor. So Dode knew exactly what he was going to endure. Before his Bashar was removed from the Roman implement of torture, it succumbed to the injuries they had inflicted, and in so doing, Dode fulfilled the role of the Passover lamb. It was Sheol, hell, which was incapable of holding Dode's soul, not Odin, pain and suffering, or Thanatos, death. This distinction is essential, and yet it was misrepresented by the alleged disciple. Oddly, and apparently losing track of what he was actually discussing. They were supposed to be discussing Pentecost, I think. Peter's diatribe was supposedly in support of misrepresenting the Mikra of Shabuah. So here in the previous statement, he is regressing and alluding to what would have transpired on Pesach and Matzah and Bakurim, but can't identify any one of the three Moed Mikra. Because that's where the death of the physical body and the suffering in Sheol transpired, and ultimately the release from Sheol to be back with his father. So he is now pretending that his God-man endured these things, and he can't make the correlation with Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. And yet he wants to claim Shabuah. So why speak of Pentecost, but then not mention the name of the other three Mikre, which would have made it possible and are infinitely more important?
Mm-hmm.
This absurd narrative remains fixated on attributing divine attributes to a mythical misnomer, Ayusu, rather than explaining the benefits of the Moed. The entire purpose of Pesach is not to celebrate Dode or, of course, a counterfeit for him. The purpose of Pesach is to give us life. The purpose of Matzah isn't, again, a celebration of Dode. The purpose of Matzah is to perfect us. I mean, each of these Moed and Mikre have a purpose. The purpose of Shabuah is to withdraw us from the corrupt nature of this mortal world where we're all decaying, and away from the time of Jacob's troubles, and take us into Shamayim, where we can enjoy Yahweh's company and then return with him when he goes about fulfilling Teruah and Kippurim. So they've completely missed the purpose of the very things that they're trying to talk all around. So they've got no clue as to what was actually transpiring. Even now, it's happened according to their timeline, and yet they can't explain what it was.
What it was.
Well, why would you buy into a religion that wants to claim for yourself things that you can't even describe? I mean, the suffering is irrelevant. What's relevant is why it was done and what it fulfilled and what that delivers. Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The fact that Dode felt pain, it's meaningless. The thing that's meaningful is that his sacrifice was to fulfill Passover, that opens the doorway to life, so that we as members of the covenant family can live forever.
Yeah, the suffering wasn't a necessary part at all.
No.
In Pesach, even
No. If you look at the way that Yahweh tells us to prepare the lamb, the less suffering, the better.
Yes. Not brutalized.
Yes. And I think that the shield Yahweh provided Dode with for that transition into Sheol separation would have shielded him from the worst part of it as well. I'm not sure there was much suffering other than the agitation of being separated from Yahweh. Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was no fun. I mean, it must have been a miserable experience, but to be in total darkness and deprived of everything for that period of time would have been difficult. So anyway, Christianity just can't figure it out that either the Torah was being fulfilled by the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, and therefore it's the purpose and the benefits of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim that matter, or there's no reason to talk about the ghoulish spectacle. The ghoulish spectacle doesn't have any value for anybody. There's no reference to a cross helping anybody in the Torah and prophets. There's no reference to pain and suffering helping anybody in the Torah and prophets. So there are few things as beneficial when understood as what actually transpired on Passover, unyeasted bread, and firstborn children, as it relates to Dode's Bashar, corporal body, and Nefesh, consciousness. Fortunately, those who have been with us and listened to these programs from the beginning know that Yahweh honored his promise to provide the lamb by accommodating the request of his beloved son to serve in this way so that the covenant children might live, be perfected, and adopted into Yahweh's family enriched, and empowered. And we know that what remained of the mutilated body was discarded by being incinerated later that night with Yahweh's instructions, which, by the way, is how Yahweh is going to handle the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah. The physical body is going to be incinerated. The difference is that God incinerated the physical body of Dode fairly quietly and out of sight, and the spectacle associated with the Adam of Parah is going to be this magnificent thing for the whole world to see and for his children to love. So during Unyested Bread, which was a Shabbat in 33 CE, the Messiah's soul entered Sheol carrying the guilt of every covenant member. He would leave it there, never to be seen again. I think, and I don't even know how I came to this conclusion, but I think it's probably by putting the pieces together. When you look at what Yeshayah says is going to occur in the 53rd chapter and our guilt being placed on him. And then you read what Dode wrote in the 22nd and 88th Mizmor about going to this place of utter darkness before seeing the light again, and that calling out to Yahweh and having this shield protecting him. That while it doesn't say it in so many words, it is the only logical connection between all of the evidence that after fulfilling Pesach with his corporeal body, that it was Dode's nefesh soul, because there is so much written about what the soul was going to do and what the soul experienced, that it was Dode's nefesh soul that carried our guilt into Sheol. And then when you go back and you consider the condition of the covenant, which we walk to Yahweh and are perfected, well, this is the way. When our guilt is removed, we are perfected. So you're able to see how the whole plan fits together. It's one of the most beautiful aspects of this picture. And when I say that the discovery that I made that David is not only the Messiah and the Son of God, but also the one who fulfilled Passover, unyeasted bread, and firstborn children, that is the greatest discovery in human history, because it not only negates the world's most popular religion, but it reveals that there is actually a means that God provided for his people, that he's predicted through prophecy, spoke about, and then came up with a plan that is consistent with everything else he has said, that gives us the fulfillment of the covenant's promises through the integration of the Moed Mikre. And while that is profoundly important, as is figuring out how Dode determined that he should make this offer, and then why Dode would be motivated to make it after he figured out that he should, and then why Yahweh would accept it, all of that stuff, I think, collectively creates the greatest discovery in human history. But there is another aspect to it, and that is the mechanism that was used. And the mechanism of a Bashar telling the story. That corporal body is a Bashar telling the story, and then that Dode would have a Bashar herald telling the story of what he did. Mm-hmm. It takes the whole discovery much further. And then to recognize the mechanism of matzah, where matzah is removing the fungus, the pervasive fungus of yeast from our souls, which is religion and politics, and taking it in then to Sheol to deposit it in what is essentially a black hole, never to be seen again. That mechanism for the means that Yahweh used with Dode to conceive that, I think, is part of the importance of this discovery. So it's so many things that are involved in it, and then understanding how this enables the benefit of the covenant through the Moed Mikre, and how it sets the timeline for not only the fulfillment of that event in 33 CE, but sets up the obvious time for the fulfillment of the final four Moed Mikre. So there's a lot to this. This is an exceedingly profound, interwoven discovery with layer upon layer of truth that prior to this time were unheralded. No one had ever perceived them. So when we talk about all of this, there is no one who's ever figured out, shared any aspect of this.
Yeah.
And there's hundreds and hundreds of aspects of this, all of which are profoundly important. And for God to make it possible for us to know these things at this time, 8.5 years before his return, and just 14 months before the Shabbat harvest, with all of the credibility that comes from having written these books and then having the means to be able to convey this, here we are, the three of us talking to God's people, trying to alert them to, you don't have much time left and you need to come to accept Yahweh's name, the offer that his son has made, and let's explain it to you. Let me tell you what actually happens so that you're in a position to capitalize on it. There's so much to this. And, it leads directly to what Shabbat represents. That Dode made it possible for us to be part of this harvest, and what Teruah represents, and how Dode's herald becomes another Bashar, and how that fills in and explains all the things that are going to happen going forward. In fact, I was reading the presentation of the Choder, and boy, when you really get back to it, the thing that I had missed is, if you read Yeshaya 10, which precedes the presentation of the Choder, because there's no chapter markings in Yeshaya, it's just one long stream of consciousness and presentation. And so when you set, the Choder doesn't come out of the blue. It's part of a train of thought that begins in the 10th chapter. And what it says is that the Choder is actually the rod of divine punishment.
Wow.
He's here to give the religious hell. Every bit as much as he is to give the covenant family life. Both of those things weave through it. And then as you develop, and when it explains what each of the seven spirits provide, and then it goes to the way that he will learn and then share, it comes out to a descriptive part that I've never been able to understand before, but it talks about the parah. And I've never seen it before. There it is. Talks about the Adam of parah is there, and you have the wolf trying to bear its fangs again, and the wolf is coming after the lamb. No, this is Paul going after, and Christianity going after the role that Dode played. And then there's two mentions of the bull, and one of them is the heifer, the productive heifer. And now you read it with this realization of what we have learned, and all of a sudden now it is prophetic of precisely what we're doing. So there are so many layers to this story, and so many interwoven prophecies, so many facets of this beautiful diamond that God has given us, all of which are tremendously reassuring and verifying that it's almost hard to know where to begin a program and stop on a program, and there's just so much to share with you. And we want Yisrael. Please listen. Yahweh's calling you home. It's really now or never. If you choose not now, then the likelihood of you surviving the time of Jacob's trouble is not very good. And if you choose now, then you can join with us and contribute to the family.
Wow.
Yahweh's worth knowing. Your rabbis are not. Your politicians are not. I heard today that Israel's going to go back in and pound Gaza. For what? You made a bad situation worse. You manufactured more Islamic terrorists than were there before you invaded. Haven't you learned anything? You're fighting this war the wrong way. Your politicians are misleading you. Your IDF failed you on 10/7, and it's going to fail you again. It's time at long last. Drop this lie that Yahweh's name doesn't mean anything, that it was okay to erase it from your lives. You need to embrace Yahweh's name. You need to embrace the fact there really is a Messiah, and he doesn't have a star. And that God did have a son, and he celebrates his son. And that his son, our Messiah, David, is the one who fulfilled Passover in year 4000 Yah and Matzah, so that we could be part of the covenant family, be empowered and enriched by God. That's what he's offering you. And all he's asking in return is that you walk away from religion and politics, that you walk along this path and answer his invitations to participate in the Moed Mikre, so that he can perfect you in this way. And you trust him, Yahweh, instead of your politicians and your IDF and your religious rabbis. And that rather than paying attention to Jewish folklore, don't be celebrating Purim, don't be celebrating Rosh Hashanah, don't be celebrating Hanukkah. Don't pass over matzah, which is really the heart of the Passover. It's just the first day. The festival feast is Chag Matzah. You need to understand what it represents. Don't let Christians rob you of your Messiah, robbed you of the Son of God, robbed you of your chance of salvation. Take it back. It's being offered to you. That's why we're here. We want you to know that the Creator God of the universe chose you, but you didn't choose him. And the offer is still there. Take advantage of it. Now's the time. He chose us to reawaken you. And he has hundreds and hundreds of prophecies about specifically what we're doing here for you. And you shouldn't be surprised by all of this, because almost everything we are saying you've never heard before. And yet there isn't anything that we're saying that doesn't resonate with you. You know it's true. Every word of it. And I remember both of you guys, when you were first exposed to this, you'd say, well, I've never heard anything like that before.
No.
But everything you're saying, it just resonates. It's the way that it really should be. And then you went through the time and the trouble to validate everything, and it's exactly this way. So that's why we're here. We want nothing more than for you to listen, to take the time to become reacquainted with your God, the God of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob, Creator God of the again. But we thank you for listening. This has been Family Hour of the Yahweh blog, and we appreciate you inviting us into your home. We've had another hiccup, another miracle. But we're not going to press our luck with the third miracle here tonight. But we do thank you so much for being part of this family. If you are part of the covenant, and for those of you who are listening, perhaps for the first time, or trying to decide if you're going to invite Yahweh to be part of your lives, thank you. Have a wonderful Shabbat.